Welcome to another episode of Blueprint Digital, where we chop up market challenges, career journeys, and how technology is reshaping go to market strategy. Today, we're joined by Chris Nordyke, who is the co founder and president of Floodlight Consulting Group, where he helps restoration companies scale through better sales systems, leadership, and culture. With over 25 years in business leadership, he's known for blending operational execution with deep work on identity and leadership. And he's the co-host of the Head, Heart, and Boots podcast. Latest content revolves around founder burnout, mental load, mental health, midlife and second half thinking, and industry revolution for restoration. Welcome to Blueprint Digital, Chris.
Hey, I'm happy to be here, man. Really excited.
Let's just dive right in. I mean, given the work you do, given your experience, some of your content, where do you see most founders getting stuck internally as they try and scale their business?
I just came out of our weekly consultant meeting where all of us cluster together and we share case studies, themes that are coming up in our client relationships, all that kind of stuff. We were actually just talking about this. I think probably the biggest thing that founders are dealing with and owners as they scale right now, like today, is two things. One, it's very, very hard to relinquish control as one scales. And so this has always been a problem for entrepreneurs, founders, owners. And at the same time, it continues to be a problem. I think now with all the distractions, all the things coming at us, AI, as well as there's a hiring crunch. It's very difficult to hire frontline labor, right? And entry-level roles right now. There are so many things tugging at your typical owner's sleeve, whether they're at 2 million in revenue or 10 million plus at revenue. I think the temptation for owners is to roll up their sleeves and get in the mix to make things happen. And I think part of it's driven out of fear that if I don't get it, if I don't do the thing, it won't get done and the company's at risk, right? And so there's always a justification for an owner to roll up their sleeves and get back in the mix or to stay in the mix. And of course, that's the biggest hindrance to scale. And we work with a lot of private equity companies. We do some due diligence. They hire us to support some of their portfolio companies and things of that sort. And so we've gotten very acquainted with a lot of these banker types and investors. And of course, a company's value, the actual enterprise value of your business, is heavily depreciated when you as the owner have your sleeves rolled up and are actually working inside the business. When you get yourself out of the business, there's a significant increase in the enterprise value of your business. So that's not one thing is owners have a really hard time getting out of the day-to-day chaos. It's hard for them to trust somebody else to do as good of a job as they do. I think the other thing that's happening right now too is owners, as they start to encounter scale, they get so swallowed up in the minutia and the details going awry in the business at any given time that they lose track of what got them to where they are, which is sales. Owners, either because they came up into the business doing the thing as a craftsman, as a construction guy or gal, or somebody that's been in home services and then they started their own company. So they come from more the technical service delivery side of the industry and they just never had really any training or experience in sales, or simply because it's an ego thing. It's an ego thing. They feel more comfortable troubleshooting the operations parts of the business. There's a phrase that comes up a lot in our client conversations where I tell them revenue covers a multitude of sins, right? You can sell your way out of almost any problem. And this might seem a little weird coming from a consultant, like we help people with all areas of their business. But I think what we've just discovered over time is that if the sales are there, we have the runway to fix everything else. In the words of an entrepreneur buddy of mine who I was just hanging out with in the sauna last night, he runs about a $30 million roofing company in the Pacific Northwest. He said, look, you want to find the 2 or 3 things that you can get right in the business and get those things so right that nothing else matters. And he's been very successful with that perspective. And I think that's an interesting thing for owners to consider is, okay, what are the 2 or 3 things in my business that if I hit a home run on just those 2 or 3 things, make everything else insignificant?
That's a great nugget. I mean, given that, what's the simplest system every service business should implement first?
I think the rally point, When your business, when your sales are flat or down, like in our industry, insurance claims are down 20%. This past year, down 20%. Massive, massive adjustment for our industry. The very first thing when we get in contact with a client we ask them about is their closing rate. You get a lead into your business. What percentage of those leads do you put into production or do you sell? And interestingly enough, and maybe this is primarily true in restoration, but I also, again, having buddies that are in roofing and we have clients that are in other verticals as well. I think this is true across the board in service companies, is we get so wrapped up in just the doing, we don't pay attention to massive KPIs like what's your close rate. And so we hone in on that. In a lot of cases, we find out their close rate's at 40%, 35%. And then you look at their customer acquisition cost, really their lead acquisition costs, because a customer acquisition cost assumes that we put that job into production, but that's all predicated on close rate. Did we actually close the deal? It cost us X amount to get the lead. And I don't know about other industry verticals. I'm not an expert, but in restoration, customer acquisition costs can be as high as $1,000 to $1,500 for that customer lead. And we routinely discover companies that when we dig into their data, we figure out, man, your close rate's at 42%. It should be, in our industry, should be upwards of 70+%. So you think about that data. So a lot of times companies are coming to us because they're like, man, our sales are flat. We're not sure what to do. We want to scale. We want to do this and that. Meanwhile, half of their leads are bleeding out the back door. They're never bleeding out the front door. They're not even getting across the threshold of the doorway. And so interesting. That's the primary KPI we attack right out of the gates. Now I will tell you historically, we used to be hyper indexed on financials because we come into these companies and they're basically running their business like a checkbook. Well, we have more left over at the end of the month than we had when we started. Things must be okay. And so we thought, well, hey, a primary focus for us has to be getting the financials clean, get their chart of accounts set up correctly so they can really make financial-based decisions in their business. And we've really shifted and morphed after working with dozens of companies across the country. And in Canada, we've now come to this anchor of, no, we first have to attack the sales problem. And for most companies, that's their close rate. They're paying so much to get business through the door, and then a bunch of it's just falling out the bottom. It's like pouring water through a sieve.
We've heard the idiom for years, to fail fast, fail forward. And I think it's a fine line, and maybe more art than science, about recognizing when to pivot versus you just haven't put enough miles on the process to vet it and make sure it's working or not working. So how do you recognize negative momentum early, but not too early? How does a founder or a leader know when it's time to pivot because of, market situations, things that are going on intrinsically in their business, such as tariffs, all of a sudden, bolster your cost of goods overnight without any warning? How do you when to it's time to pivot, but also understand, hey, we have high confidence in our model. We just have to give it a little more time to gestate and make sure it works. And then we can figure out the pivot.
Yeah. It feels really schizophrenic as an owner sometimes, doesn't it? Because you're watching perhaps a downward trend in your revenue or your profitability or some other area of the business, lead count, number of leads you're getting, daily leads. I mean, all of us have our KPIs that we track, and it's tempting when you see a persistent downward trend in any one of those areas to be like, shoot, maybe we're now in the wrong business. We need to, like you say, pivot. Now, pivoting can take a lot of different forms. But what I find instead is oftentimes as dynamics are changing in the market, we're forced to change how we engage our customer and how we position our service, how we price ourselves in some cases. I think right now what our industry is going through is we're too top heavy. Our overhead's out of control. We've had over the last 5 to 10 years with hurricanes and so forth in our business is a big driver, natural disasters and so forth. And for the last 3 years, there's been almost nothing. And it's been very destabilizing for our industry, but it's forcing our industry to professionalize ourselves around, for example, direct selling. It used to be in our industry that so much of our business came through insurance adjusters, third-party administrators, and so forth. And as that's taken a dive, part of what our industry is having to grapple with is how do we do direct selling? And there's a lot of other home service verticals as well that they've just relied on digital marketing, reputation, being in the market long enough to where people just, you have a certain amount of baseline call volume that you get and so forth. And none of us learned how to sell. We didn't learn how to go get the business. And so I guess to answer your question about when do you know what to pivot? Well, I think the first thing you have to do is say, is the market asking me to do things differently? Is it less about me pivoting on what I'm selling and more about how we're selling it and how we're finding the opportunities? Because I think a lot of us have just been accustomed to being order takers. Through some genius marketing or charisma as an owner, we've gotten the business to this place. And maybe it isn't that you need to get out of roofing or facility services or whatever vertical you're in. And it's more about just reapproaching the market through a fresh lens. And it might be just building a sales team because your old sources of lead gen are they're being upset by the market. Like right now in our industry, there's a lot of consolidation. There's a lot of big companies buying out and doing M&A. And that's creating a lot of pressure in local markets for the independent guys and gals where they didn't ever have to sell. But now these big enterprise companies are coming in, throwing lots of money at their market, which is blowing up their customer acquisition costs through the digital marketing channels. And these owners are like, they don't know what to do. They don't know what it means. And of course, we come in and we're like, look, how much of your business is coming from these lead sources? 70%. Wow, let's build another sales channel. And so that's a lot of the work we end up doing with folks is just helping them build out a direct sales operation. And for many of our clients, it's really foreign. I would say one other thing about how to know when to pivot. I think where the industry is going, again, I'm heavily embedded in the service trades, the service verticals. I think there's a trend, and I think ironically or interestingly, Amazon perpetuated a lot of this today. A lot of what we're dealing with in professional services and home services and facility services verticals has been brought about by Amazon. Amazon made it so easy for us to get almost anything we need immediately and from one source. I mean, think about how many times a week, maybe even a day, that all of us type in Amazon.com and Google something to buy, whether it's a book, a widget, office furniture, clothes, shoes, food, drink. Like, how many times a day we do that? And I think that is now coming to a head in the trades where customers want to have one phone call to make for all the services they need. We're seeing in the industry is less of a pivot out of a particular vertical, but instead a focus on owning the customer. We had a guy in our podcast who runs a big plumbing franchise, very successful, One Tom Plumber. It's kind of a big new emergent brand. What it is it's a bolt-on model to a construction company or disaster restoration company. Because when a pipe breaks, a home floods, who's often the first call? It's a plumber. And so their genius was, how do we use an additional trade, another line of service to serve as tip of the spear as a embedded lead gen tool for our other services? And I think we're going to see way more of this. And I think that might be the answer is rather than pivoting off, it's bringing more in. It's like capturing more of Mr. and Mrs. Jones's attention. Hey, by the way, we just rolled out a new carpet cleaning service, Mrs. Jones. So I'm going to leave this information with you. If you ever need carpets cleaned, that's another thing that we do, right? Duct cleaning, dryer vent cleaning. These are all extension services that many restoration, construction, carpet cleaning companies are starting to do. And I think that's a trend. It's like our business, for example, we don't, we launched a fractional sales management offering. That wasn't part of our consult. It's not really consulting. It's a whole different thing, but the market wants it. And then those same customers that need fractional sales management and help building out their sales teams, they also need operations help. And there could be a day where Floodlight does, I don't know, marketing services of some kind, right? So it's like, how do we continue to extend our value to where the customer doesn't need to look externally for another partner? I think we're just going to see more and more of that as time goes by in all verticals, right?
That's easiest to sell once you're in the home. If you can offer X, Y, or Z service, you've got an attentive customer and cost of acquisition goes way down. And
Way down.
to your point, Amazon, I mean, it's so funny. I've had multiple conversations over the years where people expect that same level of service. Hey, can I track where the truck is at on my delivery?
No, not right now. But I think that's our job as owners As the ones who are creating the vision for our business, what's the long-term path? How are we going to do this? How do we make ourselves more sustainable? I think we need to look to these prevailing businesses and our like these iconic businesses because they're setting the tone for what customers are going to expect from us. And so, like for example, there's a job management software in our industry that has a CRM component. It's not really a CRM component, but it has a feature that it does that. It offers that where once we create a work order in that job management platform, it notifies them via SMS which technician is on the way, and it sends a photo of the technician, and they can click through to like a bio of their technician, and there's cool stuff like that. And it gives the ETA of when that technician is going to be on site. I think customers expect that now because of Amazon. Nobody wants to wait on anything. And they want full visibility into the product they're about to get, when they're going to get it, how like they have so many expectations that are flowing from the Amazons of the world. But look at Costco. They've been doing this for years. They do travel. They're a travel agency. They sell furniture for your home. They do, they do basically everything a homeowner could potentially need, you can probably buy through Costco. They have vision centers. And I think as small business owners, let's just call that 0 to 50 million, I think that's our path. We need to get aligned with that and figure out how to scale our businesses to where we think of we own the customer, not the market share of our single vertical. It's like what share of the customer of the home services does our business currently own, and how do we expand that profitably? Yeah, it's exciting.
You've talked a lot about a number of disruptive undercurrents. And so what's coming next in the industry, and how's that big 800-pound gorilla called AI and its technology going to reshape the business model?
AI is still such a black box for most business owners. And I would say even for myself to some degree is we just don't know how exactly it's going to change things. And I think we're probably every single one of us is underestimating how quickly and how dramatically it's going to change things. There are some companies who are ahead of your people who are watching this, listening to this right now. You have competitors that are ahead of the curve. From where you're at with your understanding and deployment of AI. We just don't know. But what I do see is an opportunity for service companies to dramatically increase the productivity of their existing employees. I think what it means for a lot of our clients, as an example, is that those that are at, say, 5 million right now with 20 or 25 employees, I think instead of having to scale up their head count to get to 10 million, as an example, some are going to do it with the same employee roster because of what they're able to do with AI. Like in our industry right now, one of the big things that's happening is there's a lot of sea change in terms of how we estimate projects. Estimating used to be $150,000+ a year role. It was like a really nice kind of white collar role within our industry. And those compensation rates are dramatically coming down because third-party estimating companies can get a geospatial scan now with LiDAR of an interior space and have accurate measurements of that affected area to a centimeter, which means that estimator never has to set foot on the property. They don't have to walk that job anymore, and they're able to create accurate scopes. That's changing the game because a lot of these external estimating companies will do it for 1%, 3% of the estimate, and you can't do that. You can't do it cheaper in-house. And also because of the AI tools that are now starting to converge, not only to grab the data, but then also to figure out the line items, not miss any supplies and labor costs, in that scope. AI is so sophisticated. It doesn't get tired. It's not hungover, right? The next morning, it doesn't call out. And so
Didn't have a fight with their spouse.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I mean, seriously, these are real things that we have underestimated in our business historically. Just how much people affect the productivity of the overall business because people have bad days and bad weeks and bad months where their production, their accuracy, their profitability goes down. But as we start to outsource to AI some of these complex processes, it allows us to focus that much more of our energy on the customer experience and on sales. So I think that's the next wave is us automating a lot of these things that can be automated, leveraging AI to get actual better, more profitable outcomes, more accurate estimates. I think now we're starting to see our clients are also integrating some AI automation into their collections process. So the net effect of that, and I think one of the metrics that more and more service companies are going to be oriented around, software companies I think have already been indexed on this, but is revenue per employee. When we first got into this business, it was a metric that one of our mentors referenced to us just as a really great productivity metric that you can chase that has a bunch of positive downstream effects. And so when we first got into this, we were seeing a lot of companies 180,000 revenue per employee. And so you do this just a simple math, right? If your average revenue per employee is 180,000 and with your full admin burden, the average employee at your company is 80,000, that's not a very high return on investment that your business is creating. It's not a very profitable model. So it speaks to a lot of things. But anyway, what we're seeing in the industry is with the addition of AI, that average revenue per employee is going up very fast with companies that are paying attention to the automation opportunities inside their business now with AI and all the various ways they can deploy it. We're starting to see companies in excess of 600,000 in revenue per employee in the services, in the blue collar services. Unheard of. Of course, you're accustomed to this in software companies and maybe medical equipment and certain types of super high margin, high dollar, services and products. But in blue collar services, we've never seen that before. But now we're able to automate a lot of things, job file coordination, estimating like we talked about, AR and aging and collections. And of course, also we can bring some of that into our marketing and lead gen sales outreach. Some of these automations we can deploy with tools like HubSpot and other, things of that sort. So anyway, I think that there's so many things converging at once. I think AI is going to enable us to, one, more successfully deploy these added value services without the normal administrative overhead of adding, say, a plumbing division, a carpet cleaning division, a this and that, because we're so able to consolidate and simplify the back office support of those services. And that's a game changer. That's going to enable us to own a bigger share of that customer's sort of home service needs or facility service needs.
It's a great tool for providing scale versus having to go out and increase your headcount. We have a lot of conversations around AI and AI taking jobs. I mean, AI will take some jobs, maybe answering the phone, some of those things. But what we find a lot with AI is it takes the rudimentary tasks off the plates of your people so they can focus on the things that are strategic and tap into the skills they bring with them and the reason you hired and brought them in.
Yeah, it's so true. I guess the one last thing I would say about the sales piece is there's three things that owners need. Because I know just there's probably a lot of people listening to this that know they need to either grow their sales team or they need to get a direct sales operation in place in order to get to where they're trying to go. The three critical things that owners need to think about on the sales side in order to build an effective direct sales operation, whether that's one sales rep or a team of them, is one, they need to have a methodology that they adopt for their sales. And the type of methodology that we advocate for at Floodlight is what's called an advisory selling approach or a pain solution approach. And we have a deep belief that it is the best practice for sales today. The old school days of sort of candy and smiles where we're giving people tickets to the local baseball stadium, we're booze and schmooze, happy hours, this kind of stuff is really starting to fade. People don't have time for that. People are overwhelmed and distracted by all the things. And what we're finding is that advisory selling approach where it's tell me how your business functions, help me understand your business, your past experience with other contractors and vendor services. What do you like? What do you not like? What's frustrating? What creates stress and anxiety for you and your team or your client? And then how do we build systems, processes, and roles in our business that solve for those things? That's the nature of direct selling. And so you have to have a methodology for that. And you need to train your people on that. So you can bring in an outside trainer. You can go on YouTube, ask Claude to train you on that stuff. But that's what we do too, obviously. So there's companies that provide that sort of training and orientation. But the second thing you need besides that is you need to have the will and the commitment to support that sales team. And this is another gap for a lot of owners is they don't know how to do that. or they aren't yet ready to commit their time to that. And a sales team needs, if it's multiples, they need a combined weekly meeting. Salespeople are impulsive, they're distracted, they aren't linear oriented. They actually, most of them are not goal oriented beyond whatever income they're trying to make. And so, no matter how high profile and powerful and successful you think your salespeople have been historically, they need direction and management. And so that involves a weekly one-on-one cadence and a combined team meeting cadence. And we often see owners, especially 0 to 10 million in sales, we often see owners that they'll commit to that. And then the morning of, they'll text their sales rep or their sales team, "Hey guys, I got to go walk this big job. So I can't make the meeting, but hey, well, next week." And every third meeting, they're doing that. And what does that communicate to the salespeople about the importance of what they're doing and the buy-in they have from their owner? And then the last thing is operations integration. This is also the biggest overlooked thing if you're delivering any kind of service, is that the number one reason why we burn salespeople out, or they quit, or they fail to succeed, is because they've lost confidence and conviction in their service team's ability to deliver on the promise. And oftentimes it only takes one job going sideways for that sales rep's confidence to be diminished, and they're less likely to get out there and make one more cold call. Right. And so I think just when owners are thinking about, man, I probably need to put a sales team in place, those are the three mission critical components. There's a whole bunch of minutia as well, but those are the things they really need to consider. And how are we going to do that? And you can hire third parties like our company, and there's others, but those components, you got to be prepared to put those in place.
That's a great point. What does the next 12 months look like for Floodlight Consulting Group?
Well, for us, we're in the process of building out and leveraging AI within our business. We've been working on some sales rep hiring tools that create like dimensional profiles of the candidates we're looking at, based on our knowledge base. We have thousands of hours of consulting sessions with our clients, with sales reps and so forth in our database. It's an incredibly powerful tool. Many people listening here have a similar knowledge base. They don't even realize it, that they can tap into using AI. But so we're building tools like that for us to enhance and perfect kind of our hiring prowess when we're working with our clients to recruit sales reps. Right now, I've got a client session prep tool that helps us. One of the challenges in professional services is you have this cloud of information, all these clients you're working with, and it can all run together. It's very difficult to hold all the conversations in motion that we have. And so we've been building an internal system from that knowledge base, and our knowledge base is always increasing with every client session we have. And so we're building a client session prep tool that puts a session brief in front of our consultants so that they're not reliant on the processing power of their brain, but we're augmenting the processing power of all of our consultants' brain, their past experience, all of that stuff, but using AI to bring all of the right stuff in front of them with the client at the right time. So this is just a couple of the systems we're building behind the scenes. And I feel comfortable talking about it, even though our competitors may see this or whatever. It doesn't matter, because the systems we're building are predicated on our internal knowledge base. Nobody can replicate it the same way we can. And that's the cool thing about AI. That's the cool thing about any of your listeners that run service companies, is that you have native proprietary intellectual property that your business has accumulated that you can put to work for you using these AI tools. And so we're doing just that. I think that's a lot of our next 12 months. But the fractional sales management side of our business is exploding. It's going to the moon. And so I think by the end of this year, not only will our team have doubled in size, but I think more and more the entry point that service companies come to us with is going to be sales. I think that's everybody's focus, is how do we take more control over our sales? The channels that we've been dependent on are no longer reliable, or they're decreasing in value. And we need to take back our agency and really take over our future. And that is with a direct sales operation. That's going to be more and more our central focus for sure.
That's a common issue. Hey, I appreciate the time. It's been great having you on Blueprint Digital. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
It was really fun, man. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much for those watching or listening. Until next time, I'm Troy Mann with Ascent Integration Partners. Remember, the pace of change in the market is getting faster every day. Adapting to change is not a requirement, but neither is survival. Rise above with Ascent. Take care.